Okay, just like hello everyone. Tonight we got another amazing full moon, the one that corresponds to the month of Taurus or year in the Kabbalistic calendar or astrologic calendar on May the 1st in 2026. There is another given name for tonight's moon, and I am talking about the moon of flowers. But 15 days ago, during the new moon that opened this lunar cycle, I introduced the idea that energy of this cycle involves around connectivity, beauty, comfort, and healing. So tonight, I under the full moon, I want to go deeper into that because if the new moon represents the seed of a cycle just beginning, the full moon represents the complete revelation of that light. In other words, what was set into motion during the new moon now becomes visible, clear, and fully illuminated. At that time, I mentioned that consciousness emerges from the alignment or the connection of two key elements: knowledge and emotion. Understanding consciousness then as the sum of knowledge plus emotional experience that move us up toward new realizations. And when these two truly align, something a kind of healing becomes possible, not as a miracle, but as a natural result of coherence. And tonight, I want to take the idea further and share this personal vision of how consciousness unfolds with a human life. And with that in mind, let's begin. My first reflection I want to share, and that might sound simple, but I believe is one of the most important fundamentals ideas we can meditate on, is that consciousness is something that exists only within this incarnation, within this physical reality, because it is something we develop through human experience. So I could say that as we interact with different levels of reality, we begin to experience, and through that experience, we accumulate knowledge. In other words, we accumulate consciousness. And it unfolds as a constant upward spiral of development, where I interact, I experience, and I come to know. In other words, the interaction I have in a specific situation and how I experienced the sensorial and emotionally, and how I perceive the knowledge acquired in that process. Regardless of our spiritual background or belief system, most traditions converge on one idea: that we are divine beings embodied in a physical form. And the moment that divine sparks enter this reality, it takes kind of forgetting. Why? Because uh, the first task of being in a body is to experience and to learn from the body and through the body. If we think about it for a moment, a newborn cannot see clearly, cannot walk, cannot feed itself. But that doesn't mean it's not experiencing. On the contrary, it is interacting with an entirely new reality, a reality in which it depends completely on others for everything. And that total dependence is, in its own way, the first step of awakening. But what carries us through those first encounters? And is the emotion. The baby just born cries, reaches out, responds to warmth and sound long before the intellect comes into play. Emotion is the primary connector, understood as the force that moves us toward the fulfillment of a desire. In the case of the baby, to be fed or cared for, it is the only mechanism available at that stage. It is the way the body is already programmed. And emotion then is what we connect us to the world around us and to the people within it. This aligns with what we said about the letter Bab at the beginning of the month and the words of formation. The emotional realm is the bridge that connects the material world with the spiritual world. It is how energy moves from one place to another, from one person to another, and from one level of reality to the next one, beginning with love. So, consciousness doesn't begin with spiritual awakening, it begins here when we are born within a family, in a neighborhood. It is built layer by layer through every experience we have in this physical world. Because if we reflect on it as children, the people who shape our first understanding of reality are our parents, of those who raised us, and in those early years, we are genuinely curious. We ask about everything. We want to understand how the world works, why things are the way they are, or what everything means. And our parents' response, as they can, sorry, sometimes they share what they truly believe to be true. Sometimes they simplify things to protect us, and some other times they don't know the answer and improvise. But some other times, quite simply, they get it wrong because they too have developed in the very same way. But here is the key point: whether we like their answer or not, we hold on to it because there is an emotional bond attached to it, to their responses. When parents explain something to a child, they are not only transferring information, they are also transferring a sense of safety, of belonging, of authority. So the child connects to both the content and to the emotion. And in this way, our belief system begins to take shape. The Soviet psychologist Lev Vygotsky described this brilliantly through his concept of the zone of proximal development, where a child encounters something new in their environment, works through it with the guidance of someone more experienced, and gradually builds their own understanding. This is how knowledge becomes personal consciousness in that ascending spiral of interaction, experiencing, and knowledge that unfolds layer by layer throughout life. So, from the very beginning, then our consciousness is shaped not only by our own experiences, but by the social, economic, cultural, emotional, and intellectual framework of those who raised us. And the Kabbalistic sages were clear on this. They said that it's impossible not to be influenced by one's environment, and that environment is our first teacher. We absorb culture before we are able to question it, and we carry it with us, often without realizing how deeply it has shaped the way we see everything. And for that reason, it is also essential to become aware of the environment in which we develop and where we keep interacting. And bringing this into the tree of life, onto the arc of human development, reality unfolds through four levels coming from the infinite. The, I had mentioned about this before, the world of emanation, incarnation, formation, and the world of the matter. So our souls originates in the higher realms where all information exists in an infinite potential. But um, when we incarnate, that potential becomes limited in order to begin the journey toward conscious being, from the world of the matter back to the spiritual worlds. In the early years of life, all of our experiences is anchored in the physical world. We learn through the body, through the senses, through the interaction with our immediate environment. And it is there that conscious begins to take form. As we grow, especially during adolescence, something begins to shift. We start to notice that not everything our parents or immediate circle told us quite fits. We begin to question and we search for our own answers. And it's precisely here that we catch our first perception of the worlds of intellect and spiritual. Though we are still rooted in the emotional realm, centered on the formation of the identity. From there, we begin to ascend toward the world, higher worlds, or going deeper, where we going deeper to inner beings, where the inner being start to reveal itself just just before we fully step into adulthood. But something else takes place here. Before we can fully ascend into those higher spiritual levels, the system steps in. I mean, when we are still adults, or before we are into that adulthood, the system becomes to play. And society calls for our participation. We are expected to work, to build a family, to pay bills, to fit into a role. And most of us pass that inner search, not because we are weak or unconscious, but because the system is designed that way. We direct our emotional energy outward, earning money, building relationships, fulfilling responsibilities. And then, years later, sometimes decades, something brings us back to that inner search. Could be a loss, a crisis, or an event. And we find ourselves saying, I need to rediscover who I truly am. That is what many people call a spiritual awakening. But it's important to point this out. The process never actually stopped. It began at the moment we incarnate, the moment we born, and we simply made a pause. And now we resume it carrying more with us than we did at the beginning. However, by the time most of us return to this inner work, our emotional world has already been filtered and altered. It has been shaped by years of conditioning and unresolved conflicts. And the intensity we had as children, that open curiosity, that unfiltered way of feeling, has either dimmed or become entangled with the patterns we pick up along the way. We still feel, but we feel through layers, and those layers affect the quality of our connection with ourselves, with others, and with life beyond the spiritual worlds. But stepping back for a moment and placing ourselves once again at the level of the emotional realm or the world of or formation, the quality of connection we reach depends on the quality of the emotion that flows through it. A distorted, imbalanced, or blocking emotion creates a kind of interference or connects only at the level of its own distortion. And that interference begins to show up in our relationships, in our body, and in the gap between what we intend to be and create and what we actually manifest. Now, then, how do we connect with the higher worlds of spirituality, that world of emanation that lies beyond the human understanding, even beyond the emotion itself? And I believe the key is hidden in its very name. It is the real from which information emanates from the infinite, and we can only access in small portions, like brief immersions through dreams, meditations, and intuition. All of these are functions of the right brain side. But the truth is that I don't fully know. Perhaps each person has their own way of connecting to the spiritual way, to the spiritual world. But my proposal is this: the way we connect with that level of spirituality is through emotion in its fullest expression, carried all the way until that vision becomes manifested in that vision becomes manifested in reality. If we have already said that the physical world is a reflection of the higher worlds, then the task is to bring coherence to manifestation of that dream or vision. I am speaking about living the human experience in a coherent and conscious way, knowing and feeling that we are both the creator and the creation in an authentic, personal, individual, and unique way, in unity with the universe, the infinite, the divine, or whatever name you choose to give it. Here, I could say that if the first creative emotion is love, understood as that which is good for me, for others, and for creation, then on an energetic level, this will be highest vibrational frequency we could aspire to, and it's closest to those spiritual worlds. And I want to make an important clarification here. Although I have mapped the four worlds of creation as if they correspond to successive stages of human experience, it doesn't mean they occur in a strictly linear way. All of them are happening simultaneously in a potential to a greater or lesser degree. Each time we gain experience in one of them, we come to know a little bit more about them. we become conscious, or perhaps not, of how to interact within them. But in the end, when we return to the source, we don't truly know what lies on the other side. We might have intuitions, messages, dreams, ideas, but all of them are only approximations. But perhaps it is all of them, or maybe none of none of them at the same time. And this is the closest thing to quantum physics, understanding that everything is happening as a part of a wall, infinitely beyond the illusion of time and space. And with all of this, I could say that if consciousness is the degree to which we come to know and experience the different layers of reality, then the deepest level of consciousness will be the capacity to experience ourselves as part of all that exists through an inner knowing within each of those levels. As I mentioned, we only come to know and become aware of these layers through our perception of matter and what is reflected within it. I believe we can connect by feeling ourselves, but also by recognizing ourselves in everything that exists in this physical world and all that it implies. And that implies that we are and we could be a rock, but also the fire, air, and water. Also the insects, the animals of nat or nature itself, but also the entire planet and everything that make up the galaxy and the universe. And perhaps most importantly, that we are and we could be all the inhabitants of this planet, all of it in unity, bringing us closer to what might be a glimpse of the infinite by understanding the endless possibilities of creation and existence. And that elevated consciousness makes us more responsible in how we relate to ourselves and to others, but also to everything that exists, including, and this is perhaps the most difficult and most important of all, the ability to feel the person whose worldview is completely opposite to our own. Is not only to connect it's not only about to connect with people who think like me, like we do in conference or meditation retreats or sacred ceremonies, but also in everyday life, in the conflict, in the difference. And because of that, I want to say that as we go deeper into inner and spiritual world, it becomes very easy and almost natural to begin dividing the world into those who are awake and those who are not, between those who are conscious and those who are not, those who will ascend and those who will be left behind. And I think I understand why this happened. And I think it's because when we begin to see differently, when information starts to connect, there is a genuine sense of expansion, of clarity, and that can be very easily turned into a form of spiritual pride or spiritual ego. But here is the point, and where I want to gently challenge a common narrative within uh, conscious communities, that we all return to the source. without exception. Whether someone meditates every day or has never even heard about spirituality, we are still a divine being in a body, moving through our own framework of experience. Our path looks different, our conditioning is different, our timing is different, but destination is the same. And perhaps the only thing that truly differentiates degrees of consciousness is whether we are aware of the emotion through which we connect or through which we attempt to create. As I said before, these fundamental forces can be understood as love or fear. And because of this, it's not always easy to discern. The only real way to recognize it is through what becomes manifested in the physical world, what we can see and touch. And we can see it when we act from love, we expand, we care, we nurture, we preserve, and uplift. But when we act from love, it is equally evident there is hate, violence, control, or manipulation. And at some point along the way, most of us have moved through that spaces as well. Perhaps this is what healing is truly about: sustaining the vibrational frequency that arises from the coherent emotion of love. An illness, too, might arise from a coherent emotion, but one that resonates with the lower frequencies of fear. And with that in mind, I leave you for now, but I wish to have you again here in the next video in this journey to self. Thank you.